relationships critically influence development, particularly when it comes to social and emotional development. So let's talk more about the family. The family is a system. Families exist for economic, emotional support, and child rearing purposes. So the family structure evolved as a way to protect and nurture young children during their development. Now, earlier theorists held the view that parents directly and indirectly determine their children's development. But now theorists really believe that families form a system of interacting elements. So parents are not all powerful in shaping development. So families form this system of interacting elements, and that system is embedded in other social systems that can affect family dynamics, either directly or indirectly. So we see when we think about Bronfenbrenner, we really see the microsystem, so the parent-child interactions involving the family, as well as the macro system. So the culture's larger institutions will also affect the family, just as the family will affect those institutions. Let's talk a little bit more about this. I've got a diagram here to show you. So in a systems view of families, parents and children influence each other. So this interacting family unit is also influenced by other forces outside of the family. So in this diagram, you can see that there are bidirectional relationships between each parent and each child. There are also bidirectional relationships between the siblings as well as the parents. And all of these relationships are embedded in a wider social context. So an important aspect that affects family relationships is parenting. And there are two general parenting dimensions. So, if you think of like a grid, for example, this would create 4 squares on the grid. So your first dimension here is warm and responsiveness versus hostile and uninvolved. Okay, so that would be on one side of your grid, maybe on your grid, warm and responsiveness, and then the next row might be hostile and uninvolved. And then if you go up to the columns, your 2 columns would be extreme control versus no control. So you kind of have this dimension here, these dimensions. So what we see is that parenting can be described in terms of these general dimensions, and these represent stable aspects of parental behavior. So the degree of warmth and responsiveness expressed by parents to their children will differ according to the parent. But what we see is that warm parents are involved with their children. They respond to their children's emotional needs. They spend considerable amounts of time with them. They enjoy hearing their children's experiences, and they see when their children are upset and they try to comfort them. Parents who are low in warmth and responsiveness tend to be more uninvolved. They focus more on their own needs. They aren't interested in their children's daily activities. They don't pay a lot of attention to their children's emotional states, and they don't try to comfort their children when their children are upset. And then we also see that the amount of control parents exert over their children differs. So some parents are kind of like dictators, trying to regulate every facet of their children's lives, whereas others exert very little or no control over their children. So what we see is that effective control involves setting appropriate standards, enforcing those standards, trying to anticipate conflicts. So when parents have reasonable expectations for their children and keep tabs on their activities, their children tend to be better adjusted. So combining warmth and control yields 4 prototypic dimensions of parenting. So there are 4 parenting styles that result from different combinations of these 2 dimensions. So we'll talk about those 4 parenting styles in just a second. But before we do, I'd like you guys to think about your own parents. If you think about these 2 dimensions, if you draw like a perpendicular lines, so a line going up and down and a line going across, and you put warmth on the horizontal line and control on the vertical line, can you draw a dot for where you think your parents were on these dimensions? Or even if you're a parent, can you rate yourself? Or can you rate how you intend to parent when you have your own children? And just think about why you are ranking yourself that way, or why you're putting yourself on that grid. Okay, so let's talk about these 4 different parenting styles. Okay, so if we, again, combine the 2 dimensions of parental behavior, so warmth and control, we've got these 4 different styles of parenting. So first, let's talk about authoritarian parents. Authoritarian parents are typically they're high in control, but they're very low in warmth and responsiveness. So children with authoritarian parents are often unhappy, they have low self-esteem, and they're frequently overly aggressive. Next, let's go to authoritative. Authoritative parents, they do exert control as well, but they're also very warm and responsive. So children with authoritative parents tend to have higher grades, they're responsible, they're self-reliant, and they're friendly. So hopefully you can already see here that the authoritative child rearing style is really the most successful approach to parenting. The parents accept the child for who they are, but they're also involved. They exert appropriate amounts of control, but they also grant appropriate amounts of autonomy. So authoritative parenting is linked to many aspects of competence in childhood and adolescence. One of the reasons, some of the things that make authoritative child rearing so effective are that warm and involved parents who are secure in in the standards that they hold for their children are going to provide models, right? We've talked about modeling as a way of learning. So these parents provide models of caring concern and of confident, self-controlled behavior. So these parents are actually modeling good regulation strategies for their children. They're modeling care and kindness and love for their children. We also see that authoritative parents convey this sense of competence to their children, and this fosters really good self-esteem and cognitive and social maturity. So supportive aspects of that authoritative style are really powerful sources of resilience for children. So if parents are authoritative, this can actually protect children from more negative effects of like family stress or poverty, for example. Coming back to authoritarian parenting, the authoritarian child rearing style, it's very low in this acceptance and involvement, but it's very high in control, but it's more coercive control. So there's not a lot of autonomy granting here. So children of authoritarian parents are going to be very anxious, unhappy. They might have low self-esteem and self-reliance. We see that children who are subjected to who have authoritarian parents, they often have adjustment problems. They can be anxious or withdrawn, but they can also actually be aggressive themselves towards their peers. And part of this, again, comes back to this idea of modeling, that they're modeling what they see at home. So next is permissive parenting, and this would be parents who are very low in control. They're pretty uninvolved, but they are warm and accepting toward their children. So children of permissive parents tend to be impulsive, they tend to be disobedient, rebellious, they might be overly demanding or dependent on adults. They're often impulsive, they've got very little self-control. And then the last parenting style is uninvolved. So here, these would be parents who are low in control. They're uninvolved, but they're also low in warmth. So the uninvolved child rearing style combines low acceptance and involvement with little control and basically just indifference to autonomy granting. Like the parents just aren't there. At its very extreme, uninvolved parenting basically is neglect. We know that neglect, you guys, that you've seen a video on that, neglect disrupts virtually all aspects of development. So children and adolescents with uninvolved parents often show very poor emotional self-regulation, poor school achievements, depression, anger, antisocial behaviors. We definitely see that there are some cultural differences in child rearing styles and in which child rearing style is the most effective. But exploring the how and why of this is kind of beyond the scope of this class, mainly because of time constraints. But the last point that I want to make when it comes to parenting styles is that, yes, the parents affect the child, but we know, as you saw on the previous slide with the picture, that there are bidirectional relationships here. So it's a reciprocal influence. So just as parents are affecting children, children are also affecting parents. So there are really two characteristics of children that influence how their parents treat them. So the first is age, right? Parenting is definitely going to change as children grow, as they become more mature, especially into adolescence. Parents might loosen the reins a little bit. And then also temperament and behavior. So a child's temperament can have a very powerful effect on parental behavior and vice versa. And children's behavior helps determine how parents treat them, and the resulting parental behavior influences children's behavior. So this in turn causes parents to, again, change their behavior. So you can see it's a pretty dynamic relationship here. So I'd really like you guys to watch the video that I'm going to post and see if you can identify the 4 key parenting styles. So there are 4 different examples there.